We have another mock draft reaction. Mel Kiper Jr. released his second mock draft just ahead of the NFL Combine, and I wanted to take a look at who he had going to the Dolphins with the 13th overall pick, talk through that prospect, see if it makes sense for the Miami Dolphins. But before we get into all of that, we do have a sub-challenge on today's show, and it's with our rival Buffalo Bills channel that just got launched a month and a half ago. Who can get the most subs on this video? I cannot take losing to the Bills on YouTube. We already get crushed by the Bills on the football field so consistently. Hopefully that changes soon. But at least we can control our own destiny by winning our sub battle against the Bills breakdown on today's show. So hit that sub button. All right, we're not going to waste any time here with the 13th overall pick in the 2025 NFL Draft. Mel Kiper Jr. had the Miami Dolphins selecting offensive lineman Armand Membou from Missouri. And this is someone that we have talked about in the past on mock drafts, on mock draft reactions from other content creators. And Membou is continuing to rise up draft boards where he ultimately could be the first offensive lineman taken in this draft. Now, I know Will Campbell is getting all the buzz at number 4 overall with the New England Patriots, but I think there is a legit possibility that Membou could get taken inside the top 10 as well. The 49ers are a team that have been linked consistently to Membou, and they hold the 10th or 11th pick. I actually think it's the 11th pick, so maybe not top 10, but he is rising up boards to where he could be off the board when the Dolphins are picking at 13. But let's see what Mel Kiper had to say about Armand Membou. Miami could lose both starting guards, Eichenberg and Robert Jones, to free agency, and there is a chance to improve the pass protection as a whole. The Dolphins were 28th in pass block win rate this past season, 55.7%, and quarterback Tua Tagovailoa has had 3 diagnosed concussions over his career. This must be a priority. At Missouri, Membou played right tackle, where key contributor Kendall Lamm is also a free agent, by the way, but he can really line up anywhere. And some scouts think he's a better fit inside at guard. He allowed just 1 sack in 2024. And there is something that I like personally, but I also know that Chris Grier values quite a bit, and that's versatility alongside the offensive line. Chris Grier values offensive tackles more than offensive guards. Most likely everybody does. This is what is more valued around the league. But Chris Grier likes the guys that are able to play inside and outside. I think it's the reason why he targeted Isaiah Wynn in free agency a couple years ago and wanted to re-sign him last offseason, but ultimately didn't get the return on investment this past season due to his return from injury. But Membou being able to play inside, play outside, like Austin Jackson has done in the past, is a reason why I think Membou could be one of the top offensive linemen on the Miami Dolphins big boards when we get to the NFL Draft in late April. And we're going to talk about Membou as a prospect here in just a second, but let me know, would you draft Armand Membou out of Missouri at the 13th overall pick to shore up some offensive line help, type D for draft, or type P for pass? I would be typing my Ds. I would absolutely draft Armand Membou. There's a lot of reasons why you should like him as a prospect: his versatility, his athleticism, his ability to play in the zone run blocking scheme that the Dolphins employ with Mike McDaniel as the play caller. Membou can do it all. But I did want to look back at this mock draft before we talk about Membou as a prospect more in depth about who the Dolphins passed up in this mock draft to take Membou at 13. These were the top 5 players that I thought Miami could be interested in that they took Membou over. Malachi Starks, the safety out of Georgia. Michael Williams, the edge from Georgia as well, who's an intriguing player because in most mock drafts, he's going inside the top 10, but he was available on the board and was not drafted by Mel Kiper. Jahdae Barron, the defensive back from Texas, who can play outside at the corner, play nickel, can play safety, has been rising up boards. He was there. Walter Nolan was there. And then the true offensive guard, Tyler Booker from Alabama, was there. And I got to be honest, if I was sitting there picking at 13, I think Membou would probably be in my top 3 or 4 alongside Nolan, Michael Williams, and Malachi Starks. But I have a little bit of a prediction to make on the show right now. And now this can be changed because of free agency. We'll be changing things based off who the Dolphins do and do not sign. But I don't think the Dolphins are ultimately going to draft an offensive lineman at 13. I know that might frustrate people. That might annoy people that Miami is failing to draft an offensive lineman at 13. But the reason why I think they do not draft one is because I ultimately think they address offensive line in free agency and then utilize that first round pick to go defense in the first round. There is just so many better offensive linemen in free agency in comparison to like free agent corners, free agent defensive linemen, free agent edge rushers. Like the offensive line group is fine. Like you got Aaron Banks, Mekhi Becton, Will Hernandez, Will Fries, James Daniels. You could sign two of those guys that will only cost you a combined $24, $25 million per season for two of them on multi-year contracts. You can now kind of solidify your offensive line with veterans, right? You can have Patrick Paul at left tackle, one of those free agents at left guard, Aaron Brewer at center, one of those free agents at right guard, Austin Jackson at right tackle. Feel pretty confident about your offensive line. Still can draft depth pieces on the interior and on the outside in the third, fourth, fifth rounds where you have a lot of picks. Yeah, that's not a bad thing. They probably should do that. But to me, with some of these elite defensive players like Starks, like Walter Nolan, Michael Williams, Jahdae Barron, Will Johnson if he's there, I think it would be better used to use the 13th pick on one of those young defensive studs rather than on an offensive lineman when you can sign multiple starters in free agency and still draft an offensive lineman potentially for the future in the middle rounds of the second, third, fourth round where you have so many picks and so many options. That's kind of where I think the Dolphins were ultimately going to go with this, but that can change. We'll see how the Dolphins do in free agency. But let's talk about Membou here in just a second because, well, Kiper mocked him here, so let's talk about him as a prospect and his fit. But before we do that, I want to shout out Prize Picks, the sponsor on today's show, and my favorite daily fantasy sports app that I play every day. All you do is pick more or less on two or more stat projections, and you could win up to 1,000 times your cash right now. And I know football is not here, but you can play baseball, that's just around the corner, basketball, hockey, golf, professional, collegiate, it doesn't matter. PrizePicks also invented the flex play, which means you can still cash out if your lineup isn't perfect. You can double your money even if one of your picks doesn't hit. And if you sign up today, you can get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. You can play so many different ways, by the way, daily, season long. Think Steph Curry will get more than 5 3-pointers next week. Giannis more than 35 points. Sure, take those picks. Or you can look towards the baseball season and go season-long projections like I have. I have more than Paul Skeens strikeouts, more than Tarek Skubal strikeouts, more than Jaron Duran's home runs. That's one example of how you can play Prize Picks on a basis, either season-long or daily. So join me and the millions of others on Prize Picks. Download the app today and use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. One more time, download the app today. Use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. Run your game. Let's get into Armand Membou as a prospect because, boy, did he have an excellent season this past year for Missouri in the SEC, putting up gaudy numbers according to Pro Football Focus. Is one of the highest graded offensive linemen, regardless of tackle or guard position this past year. 90 overall grade. It did not allow a sack. 4 penalties only as well. That run blocking grade is just so intriguing. But taking away from what he did on the field, you heard Mel Kiper earlier say that although he has been a right tackle at Missouri for the past 3 seasons, many scouts believe he will go to guard. Well, he isn't the biggest offensive lineman. He's 6'3", 314 pounds. Now, the offensive lineman will be tested and interviewed this upcoming week in the Combine on Fridays and Saturdays, so we'll get an official measurement on Membou arm length, which is important for offensive linemen. 34 inches is the benchmark for playing tackle in the NFL. We'll get official weight, official height. We'll get to know his speed and athleticism. But he is a smaller guy, which is why he kind of projects as a guard rather than a tackle, even though he's played tackle in college. But that size of Membou is kind of leaning into, in my opinion, what his top trait is as an NFL draft prospect. Because we talked about his versatility, but the athleticism that Armand Membou possesses is what makes him so intriguing. Because when you think of what the Dolphins like in their offensive linemen, they like the ability to get to the perimeter and get to the second level. You have to be able to play in a zone run blocking scheme because Miami, as we consistently say, runs more zone run scheme and zone running plays than almost everyone out there. They run so many end arounds, tosses, stretch plays where you need to be able to get out on the perimeter, get to the second level. And Membou does that quicker and better than almost any other NFL draft prospect at the offensive line spot this year. And it was reflected with his 2024 PFF grades in the run blocking department. When you looked at offensive tackles, we didn't do guards, just offensive tackles. He ranked 7th in run blocking grade this year. He ranked 8th in terms of total offensive tackles in zone run blocking schemes, and he still ranked elite in the gap schemes at offensive tackles with 18th overall. So he can do it in any type of scheme, but he specifically excels in the zone type of scheme. And when you think of what the Dolphins have at offensive line, his versatility and ability to slide in at any position is just going to be such a high value if the Dolphins drafted him. Yeah, Patrick Paul is likely going to become that starting left tackle, but with Aaron Brewer at center, Austin Jackson at right tackle, you need a starting left guard, you need a starting right guard. Now, Austin Jackson, although had his best season in 2023 as a tackle, he has played guard in the past, and maybe he gets moved inside for Membou at right tackle. But I would probably project Membou to get slotted in at right guard in between Brewer and Jackson, and you would have one heck of an athletic trio on your offensive line from center, right guard, right tackle if Membou was your ultimate right guard starter week 1 in 2025. And I will say this, even though Membou projects as a guard, it is obvious based off his draft history that Chris Grier prefers tackles that can move inside his guards rather than just pure offensive guards. And that is not Chris Grier just by himself, by the way. I want to make it very, very clear that offensive tackles are valued higher in the NFL than guards. It just is, because protecting the outside is much more important with these talented edge rushers like Myles Garrett, Micah Parsons, Max Crosby, Chop Robinson rushing the passer and getting to the quarterback from the perimeter. But Grier likes those guys that can play across the entire offensive line. Not going to ask you to play center, but if we need you to in a spot, can you play left guard? Can you play right tackle? Can you play left tackle? Well, we've seen Isaiah Wynn have to do that. We've seen Austin Jackson do that over his career. We've seen Liam Eichenberg do that, even though he was horrible at it. Membou is capable of doing that, which is why I think he would be someone that Chris Grier has circled pretty high on his big board, as I mentioned earlier in the show. All right, that will do it for this episode of Dolphins Today by Chat Sports. Make sure you are subscribed because as we get closer and closer to the NFL Draft in late April, we will have you covered. And we mentioned free agency will change a lot for Miami. When the Dolphins make moves in free agency and sign players, we will have you updated with videos. So join the channel and subscribe today.